But I just wanted to introduce why this has been set up. So I'm part of the UK SFP membership, and I attended the Bradford conference back in July. And that was when I met Sarah. And my background is speech and language therapy, and went along just to find out a little bit more about how solution focused practice can be adapted to work with young children and young children who present with autism. And I was really blown away with Sarah's presentation, in the way that she's adapted the approach and using supported communication techniques to help these children access um, the language of solution focus and help with their well-being. So that is the reason why that I asked her whether she would come back and present to a much larger community, who could access and understand the work that's going on in different parts of the world. So Sarah, over to you. I'm gonna try and pin you so that you can get you can be big.
Ooh. Well, I'm going to share my screen. I'll share it from kind of the offset if that's okay. Let's see
Mhm.
whether this goes well. Okay, can you all see that?
It's coming. Yeah.
Can you see that now?
Yep.
Okay, okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming. So just to introduce myself, I'm Sarah Kellett and I'm the outreach education lead for Westmoreland and Furness Primary Schools, and I'm based at a specialist school in Cumbria. And I'm also midway through my PhD at the University of Lancashire. And as Suzanne said, I'm here to talk to you about my research, which is at its midpoint right now. So the focus of the research is using solution focused practice to support autistic pupils with the mental health within the primary classroom. So does anyone have any experience in supporting autistic people using solution focused practice? So adults or children or yourselves even. I don't know whether people want to just quickly type in the chat. I can't really see that many people, but I think I can probably bring up the chat function. Yeah, there you go. Just wondered if anybody had actually had any experience of supporting autistic autistic people at all. So yeah, a few people have been yeah, in lots of different settings. So I am still a practicing teacher. So I work within the classroom on a weekly basis as well. So it's become a huge part of my practice, and I've incorporated into that. And it's really fascinated me how the approach has been so empowering for the pupils. So the let's see if we can move on. So the aim of the research is to explore autistic pupil and practitioners' perceptions and experiences when using solution-focused practices to support mental health in the primary classroom. And that's broken down into three supporting research questions. So what's the lived experience and perceptions of solution-focused practice for the autistic pupil? For the practitioner, and also to what extent does the unique elements of the individual schools that I went into and its culture impact solution focused practice and the intervention. So the research aim really was to contribute to this emerging body of work, using the principles of solution focused practice as this alternative mental health intervention to support the pupils within the specifically the primary classroom, because that's where I'm based. Um, Given the significant length of time a pupil might need to wait for treatment and sometimes inappropriate treatments offered, the research explored the potential of solution focused practice as an accessible and holistic alternative for practitioners to use, kind of boots on the ground, as a mental health intervention. You know, the impact of poor mental health on a child's ability to access their education is significantly relevant to my day-to-day practice. And after I was introduced to the approach, I adapted it with an autistic pupil in my classroom at the time, and I put together a case study. And the results of the case study suggested the potential pretty significant and positive benefits of using it with autistic pupils, but when appropriately adapted and applied. And this has been the motivation for the research. So this is the journal article that came out in the Journal of Solution Focused Practice earlier this year. So it was myself and Gareth, I know he's online. We put this together, and it goes through the initial case study, and again, the motivation for taking this research a little bit further. So looking into the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, all the kind of interesting bits of information, really. So the when and the where. So the research consisted of 3 case studies, so in 3 different schools, which took place over the course of last academic year. So I had a 5 form entry mainstream city school, a 1 form entry rural mainstream school, and a specialist school. And the rationale behind the 2 geographical locations was to contrast types of locality, their associated culture, and the school size, and how all of that might impact the intervention within being successful, really, and if they could go ahead and get to a point of doing the intervention in the first place. This built on another previous study of mine, which highlighted that special schools might have the ability to provide better and more consistent mental health support for pupils. So practitioner skill set, higher ratios, smaller class sizes, and that piece of research is just about to come out in the British Journal of Special Education. So who? So schools identified pupils against quite a specific criteria. So they had to have an autism diagnosis, they needed to be verbal, and functioning at the level of a child age 4 or above, as defined by development matters, and have mental health challenges or concerns as identified by the schools or their caregivers. Schools then selected an appropriate pupil based on a holistic overview of the pupils within that criteria. And then the schools approached the caregivers to discuss whether they would be happy for their child to be involved. So practitioners were really carefully identified after the pupil had been identified. There was 3 practitioners within each school. So we had a lead practitioner, and that was a member of support staff who would lead the intervention with the recruited pupil. That member of staff needed to be part of the pupil's daily support team, so really familiar and knew all their signs of dysregulation and how they functioned. We then had a backup practitioner, so that again was a member of support staff who would be able to step in should the lead practitioner not be available for sickness or having to go to a different class or for one reason or another. The backup practitioner also provided a support role for the lead practitioner and act as an independent witness on behalf of the pupil throughout the research process. They also watched the recordings of the interventions every week for the purpose of data validity and some rigor behind it. Now, we also had a member of SLT who was part of the group, and they were to provide a support role to the lead and the backup practitioners to the pupil, and also to the pupil's family should they have wanted that. So their purpose was to informally check in each week with the pupil following the intervention, and additionally watch the video recordings as well with the backup practitioner. So we had 2 practitioners who would do fidelity check on the intervention. So the research isn't just going to be me saying this is fantastic and it's working, and there are other people involved who we've gone through quite a rigorous process. So what happened? We recruited and we did social stories to support the pupils' understanding, which I'll show you further down the line. We did social stories on understanding research, what is research, and also around giving consent. So the pupils had to have this talked through with them prior to all of this happening. We had pre-intervention interviews and questionnaires with the lead practitioner of each setting and with the team around the child as well. So that could have included the class teacher as well and any other members of the school who were involved with the pupil at that time. So the three practitioners in each school underwent some training delivered by myself, and then the intervention happened, and they were 6 video recorded sessions of the pupil and the practitioner, and then the fidelity checks on the back of each one. After the interventions, we did the post-intervention questionnaires and interviews again with the same people who did the pre-ones for us. All of this happened with discussions with, so Chris Iverson was involved in some discussions, Adam Frower, lots of discussions with Karen, who's on, and with Gareth. And the practitioners undertook quite a short training program, really. We had to do it in quite a short amount of time because, as we know, it isn't ideal, but it has to be realistic. It had to be realistic to try and fit it into the school timetable if this was going to develop into something that may be usable in the future. So I developed it myself, again, with discussions from the University of Lancashire mental health team, Fiona Robinson and Rose McCabe at the City University, Tara Gretton, I had some conversations with her, and with Amanda Morris as well. So the aim of the training was to expose the practitioners to the solution-focused practice underpinnings, the philosophy of it, and assumptions. It was to demonstrate and discuss techniques and the principles, and for the purposes of this research, to understand how we were going to adapt it in order to support the autistic pupils involved. So why did I do it? So the research is intended to have an impact on the outcomes and expectations for autistic pupils within their education and within the school systems. So the research particularly seeks to raise awareness of the importance of accessible and continuous and holistic interventions for autistic pupils, which are both empowering and assist the development of positive self-perception. So not just another intervention that's being done to them within schools. And I hope that it will have an impact on an autistic pupil's ability to feel fulfilled, confident, and content, and to reach the potential in all areas of their lives, so essentially a real essential life skill for them to have. And embedding the ethos and principles of solution-focused practice and allowing time for the professionals to apply it could result in whole school mental health benefits, positively influencing other areas of school life and practice, and may also prevent the need for referring some pupils to outside agencies. So it could be quite a beneficial one if I use the kind of phrase that we're saving money within the local authority. Additionally, the research could have a potential impact on policy. So to revise assessment approaches by both schools and government agencies, to be more realistic and governed by the pupil, taking account of their cognitive development and setting meaningful and appropriate targets. Now, I'm very aware that's very pie in the sky thinking, but we've got to start somewhere, really. So that covers the basics of what the research is about and why I've done it. So solution-focused practice and autism. So there's a focus on specific desired outcomes and an emphasis on what the individual wants to happen. So there was 3 main principles that really aligned for me when I came across solution-focused practice And these are the three reasons really. And this was a real key one. So this focus on specific desired outcomes. So real characteristic of autism, the monotropism, hyperfocus, and being very specific on what you want to happen. You want it to kind of be led by you. And this was a key one for me. So the solutions that don't necessarily fit the problem, but instead fit the pupil. So by doing this, we're able to meet the pupils where they are, and we're able to go with their interests, their ideas, and it really made them feel heard. And they know themselves best at the end of all this. And this is a real powerful one for using it within the classroom, the use of therapeutic pauses and silences, because it really supports the processing and allows time for the autistic pupil to think and to process what's going on, to process what's being said to them, to process the environment around them, their thoughts and the feelings, and what your expectation is of them. It gives them all that time to be able to do that without being overwhelmed and bombarded. And like I said, we use this in schools a lot, and we support this process through the use of visuals. So we already use quite a lot in schools anyway. You know, we do growth mindsets and continuous provision and scaling. So there's a lot that we already do. So visuals, one of the main reasons why we're kind of here. So visuals and drawings have been used throughout history to convey co-constructive meaning. For example, hieroglyphics and cave drawings. And visuals and art is able to function as a language because of the meaning that lies within its symbolic form. And it's because of that that when needed, art can be adapted as a means of universal communication. And it is suggested that art and visuals can serve as both a language and as a way to express and explore the unsayables. And this is especially true for the children that we work with additional needs and communication difficulties, or generally for any of us exploring abstract concepts. And visuals and art invite this alternative mode of receptive and expressive communication, which can circumvent the limitations of language if we have them. And when I'm explaining about the importance of visuals, so even with pupils who are verbal, I like to get people to think about being in different countries. So I like to get people to think about all the signs that we look at when we go on holiday to different places, all the things that help keep us safe, reduce our vulnerability, and help us understand what's going on around us if we don't understand the language. So I'm going to show you some important sides in their written state, which we may need when we go to another country. So if you know Mandarin, and I know that there's somebody from Hong Kong, so you're not allowed to play this game. So yeah, you need to keep quiet. So these are some signs, some words that we might see if we went to a different country. And I'm going to go with the assumption that the majority of us don't understand what these mean. So what I want to show is these words in visuals. So we've got toilet, we've got no entry, we've got danger, we've got exit, we've got disabled sign, and we've got McDonald's. So all of these words, all of these visuals, we will see in most countries throughout the world. And it's obviously so much easier for us to be able to understand what these signs, what these words mean by just using the visuals alone. So that will reduce our vulnerability and it will help keep us safe. And this is the same for when we use visuals to support pupils within schools to support their understanding. So I'm going to move on to another activity, and this is where I want you to be able to use the chat function. I'm going to put a word up on the screen. And so it's a bit like our Articulate, if you've ever played that game. I'm going to put a word on the screen, And what I want you to do is type in the chat how you would explain that word without using the word. Okay, so can't use the word that I put up on the screen, but try and describe it in the chat function. So I hope that makes sense. So, so the first one is milk. So if you can just put into the chat, how would you describe that word, but don't use the word? Amazing, thank you. Nutritious liquid, I like that one. Goes with cereal, like that. Amazing. Cow, cow juice. Yeah, so lots and lots of different things. I'm going to move on to another one. Babies drink it, they certainly do. So next one is Christmas. So same thing. How are you going to describe the word Christmas without using the word Christmas? Christine, yeah, Jesus. It's funny, I've never actually, in all the times that I've done this, nobody's ever referred to it as Jesus's birthday. So this is a new one for me. Presents, turkey tinsel, yeah. Normally, when I do this in person, somebody just shouts out ho ho ho, and it's kind of game over at that point. Party time, brilliant, Kelly. So the next one, again, unfortunately, nobody can shout out to me. Pirates. There you go. Thanks, Rachel. See, when you look at that in the chat, it just looks like somebody screaming. Yeah, but I do get what you mean. Yeah, brilliant. One arm, one leg. Sea robber. Wow. Okay. So next one, work experience. It's gone quiet. How do you how do you explain work experience to somebody practicing a job unpaid? Yeah, brilliant. So a little bit trickier. Trial job, yeah, brilliant. Got two more for you. Football, this is a really easy one. Anyone for football? Brilliant. Magic water needed for injuries. I've never heard that. And then the last one, which is going to, I'm assuming, going to stop the chat. Bog snorkeling. How do you describe bog snorkeling without using the word bog snorkeling? Exactly. Yeah. So it becomes a bit trickier the more abstract the concept gets, really. Yeah. Under mud breathing. Oh, wow. Yeah, excellent. So thank you so much for getting involved in that. Uh, I'm going to click on not possible. So do the visuals make that easier to understand? So as we can see from the chat, the amount of words and the difference in words that we could use, even though there's lots of similarities, people put things across in different ways. And when you use a visual, you're using that one symbol and it makes it a lot easier to understand. So one more thing for you to do. So again, write what you see. So I'm going to show you some visuals now, and I just need you to type in the chat, what do you actually think that they mean? So any possibility of what that might mean. Eating a cow, I've not seen that one before. Amazing. Massive octopus it is. I think you'd turn around at least anyway, wouldn't you? Watch out for legs. I hope that's not true, Gareth. Right, next one. What might this be trying to tell us? Thanks, could be it. Brilliant, thank you. And then we've got this one. Yeah, definitely a heavy load. Rachel, you're coming up with some very good ones. Unusual load. Yeah. And final one is I couldn't even begin to hazard a guess at what this might be, but it is a real sign, this one. Well, they all are. No carrying cycle. That yeah, it does look like that, and it's what an interpretation of it. So again, the point that I wanted to get across and get keep them coming is that when we do use visuals, we need to make sure that one, they're consistent, and two, that the visuals that we're using make sense. So again, there's so many interpretations that we all have of the visual. So although using visuals is really important, we really, really need to make sure that we are making sense of what it is. So even if we just put one word under these visuals and that's what you mean, the visual can be used, and you need to make sure that you include the words in the visuals to make sure that they make sense. So there's a lot of background that goes on behind you using the visuals. So I hope that made sense to you all. So Temple Grandin. So I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Temple Grandin. So she's a quite a famous autistic lady who does lots of public speaking. There's lots of films around. Well, there is a film around her, and she's written loads of books. And I really like this quote from her because it helped me understand how the autistic mind works. And she said, I think in pictures. Words are like a second language to me. When somebody speaks to me, his words are instantly translated into pictures. And I recently attended the National Autistic Society conference, and there was a guy at the conference, and he was a non-speaking adult, and he did a whole presentation around his experience of being at school, and he facilitated his communication through typing, and he described his experience at school as non-speaking, and he talked about this presumption of his inability and incompetence, which was really sad to hear. And he described something similar to Temple Grandin. He said that when spoken people spoke to him, words just floated in the air and then dissipated. They just disappeared. And that when he was really young, talking was just he just thought there were noises that people made, really. So the autistic mind works in a way that it translates your words into pictures, and that's why it's additionally really, really helpful to use the visuals. So reasons to use visuals to support autistic pupils. So they're permanent. So as I've just said, the spoken word disappears, and then the visuals will remain there, so they don't disappear. They allow time for processing, for that language processing, that therapeutic pause that I referred to earlier. They support pupils to see what we mean. So there's something around a 90% reduction in processing by us using visuals to support autistic children. They're transferable, so they're adaptable, they're portable, and they can be used in most situations. As I showed earlier with the translating the language into the visuals, they can be used at school, at home, in the community, when you're out and about, and also with therapy. They reduce anxiety. So, for example, if all our phones, all our diaries, all our shopping lists just disappeared, you know, how would that make you feel? I can imagine that. Well, I know myself, if all my lists disappeared, I'd have quite a lot of anxiety about how I would know what I was doing with my day. And as a cognitive, functioning and verbal adult, if that was taken away from me, my diary or my phone, to know what was happening throughout my day, I'd struggle. So adding tiredness, adding overload, adding emotions, heat, hormones, we all still have the ability to use verbal language and to retain information, but a lot of the pupils that I support find that challenging, and adding in all these additional extras, they lead to overwhelm and their voice disappears. So they're going to struggle a lot more with being able to verbalize what they need. So they build independence. So they build independence and they build autonomy, and it lowers frustrations and it supports the lowering of behaviors as well. And one of the main things is that they've got no attitude. Visuals don't have a tone. Visuals don't have an accent. There's no discrepancy in tone. So the difference of me going into work and supporting in the classroom on the first day back in September, supporting a pupil who might be a little bit challenging, is going to sound very different. So if I fast forward to the first week of December, when I'm 3 months in, I'm a little bit worn down. You've got Christmas sensory overload. My tone's probably going to sound a lot different to when I first started in September. So the visuals really support and take that away. It takes away the human element of it. And if you think back to the activities that we've just done, the amount of words used or the possibilities to just describe one thing are really, really vast. And if you put yourself in a place of a pupil who's dysregulated, overwhelmed, trying to hold it together, as adults who are supporting, we come over and we want to do our best. And with the best will in the world, it comes from a really lovely place. But we start talking because we love the sounds of our own voice, and we start talking and we try and help. And we might get a little bit frustrated. We might have had a bad day ourselves, but there's lots and lots of language there, and there'll be quite a lot of discrepancy in how I support one day to another. And then another supportive colleague comes along to try and help us to help them. And all you're doing is adding more and more verbal language in. And you're on a one-way ticket to a meltdown. Whereas if we support with visuals, it takes away all that element. So the visuals are incredibly powerful for the pupils. So another alignment that I came across when I started looking at solution focused practice and introduced to it was something called intensive interaction. Has anyone heard of intensive interaction? I don't know whether you want to bob it in the chat. Some of you working in special education might have come across it. So it really, really aligned with a way that we already practice within particularly specialist settings. So it's a person-centered communication approach that was developed in early 1980s by a head teacher and teacher who worked together at a school, which supported children with profound learning disabilities and physical disabilities. And they made a strategic move from a behaviourist inspired pedagogy to a more flexible and collaborative one, quite reflective, and it was influenced by a psychological theory based on something called augmented mothering, which is a transactional approach. And this became known as intensive interaction. So it directly promotes social inclusion, communication, regardless of age and values. Individual uniqueness as a person was paramount, and practitioners need to consciously adjust the communication style to facilitate that mutual connection. And in doing so, the person that they're supported becomes empowered to successfully connect and engage in a two-way communicative exchange. And this is mostly done with non-speaking pupils or pupils who are pre-verbal. And in turn, it promotes the social inclusion and the emotional well-being of those pupils. And it supports the fundamentals of communication. So the techniques that we use to support intensive interaction are, as you can see, quite similar to the ones that, some of the alignments within solution focused practice. So, we tune in, we make ourselves available, that pause and waiting, letting them lead, us being responsive, that being relaxed and unhurried, not for us to drive on, we're following what they want to do, to not get involved and do too much ourselves, and also to just enjoy the interaction is makes it quite powerful. So there's a lot of mirroring back. So very similar to using the client's words within our conversations. So instead, we would use the people's utterances, their noises, their gestures. So I felt that the principles and techniques were quite aligned with solution focused practice. So I'm going to go through the visuals that I actually used for all my case studies. So I'll take you through some of the all of the case studies that I did. So these are the social stories. So as I said before, I did understanding research and giving consent. So this is the one on giving consent. The pupil got this read to them over the period of 2 weeks before signing the consent forms to go ahead with the research. So it's really, really valuable in getting them to understand what this was all about. So I really knew that one pupil got it because he was asked by his teacher later on about going to load the washing machine, and he said, "I give consent to go and do that." So it was it was really, really nice to see them using it in context as well. So it made me feel, yeah, a lot better about it all. So I've added this one in from last time, Suzanne, and this is the pupils pre-intervention questionnaire. I was asked a bit about it after the last presentation. So the pupils filled this out before and after the intervention, and it gave me some incredible and very specific data. So the time constraints of school actually worked in my favour this time because practitioners didn't really do it at the right time. They did it a little bit later than anticipated, but inadvertently, it ended up being really, really useful. So resources and strengths. So these You Choose books were an absolute godsend when it came to us discussing and opening a really lovely dialogue with the children. So at the schools that they work in, the staff and practitioners already know the pupils in depth, but we really wanted to open up that dialogue individually. And they loved this time just to focus on them and just to follow their lead where they went to within the books. We also had some really nice games of all about me and just got them really talking about themselves and pulling out those strengths, pulling out those resources and opening up conversations that a lot of them had never really had before or had the specific time set aside to be able to have those with a practitioner. So the best hopes. So we knew that this had the potential to be quite challenging. So as a team prior to the intervention, we discussed specific challenges that each pupil was having in case they were unable to directly think or co-construct one as part of the intervention. And just through direct conversation, all three pupils were unable to give a best hope or goal. So this document here mitigated some of those challenges and gave both the practitioner and the pupil a structure and focus, which led them, alongside the pre-intervention questionnaire, to be able to independently identify something that they wanted to be different. And then the practitioners supported or clarified the wording on the back of it. But it's worth noting that in schools, they probably would present to us or outside agencies at this stage, which means that going straight to the description would, in these circumstances, be best practice and most efficient within a school environment. So the miracle question. So visuals were used from the onset to support the practitioners and the pupils. I made a bank of resources at the beginning of the interventions like these for them to begin with, to see how the land lied within what they picked up on. There's an example along the bottom how one practitioner began to describe the miracle question with them and led them into that kind of way of thinking. But from this point on, the visuals became more and more nuanced and individual as we progressed through. So they also had these words available to them as well. So these would all get cut up and they'd be available to support the conversations that were happening. So the first case study, so it's a 5 form entry city mainstream school. Can't say that fast. So this pupil had the lowest level of learning disability and support need. They were in year 3, but working at around year 1 level. So after identifying their goal, they initially tried to record their best day. So each intervention was recorded using a video recorder, and this pupil really took to it and wanted to video record himself throughout the whole school, which was fantastic. However, he became incredibly escalated. He enjoyed it so much that we had to kind of back off, and it wasn't the way forward to get what we wanted. So instead, the practitioner drew out the map of the school, as you can see on here, and then he used a little toy car and figures, and he acted out his day in great detail, which was facilitated by the practitioner. And he just came alive while he was doing it. It was fascinating to see. So as I said, for the sessions, I made an absolute mountain of visuals, and from all the things that they were talking about within the sessions that we'd seen. And he wanted to go on to a scaling using 1 to 3. So 3 was his best day, 1 was the opposite. And for each one, each number, he acted out each one in great detail, and it was fantastic to watch. He completely embodied each number, and this seemed to be a really important part of the process for the pupils, to understand and to be able to engage with the scaling. So they then used arrows to support how they could move to each stage. So how are they going to get from a 1 to a 2? How are they going to get from a 2 to a 3? Who would support them? How am I going to do this? So I'll take you through. So we've had the number 1, then we've got number 2. So they were beginning to describe that they were a bit wobbly at this point, a bit bubbly, and starting to wobble. How are they going to either go back down to a 1 or are they going to move to a 2? And number 3, I think they described it as having all the ducks in a row. So they had all the energy to complete everything at school. So that this pupil's goal was to have the energy to do everything in school. 1 was that they had no energy at all, and 3 was that they had all the energy in the world. On the back of all of this, so he completed all of this independently. We provided the visuals, and after going into all the detail, he was able to independently put the visuals where he wanted them to be. So it's a bit blurry, this one. And then on the back of all of that, I took all that information and then put this scaling together for them to be able to make it transportable and usable within the classroom. And when I went back in, they had it up on the wall, and he was able to then use that independently to move forward, to move backwards, and to get himself unstuck. So the second case study was this pupil was our highest masker, quite a lot of hidden vulnerabilities. There were a year 6 pupil working at year 5 level. It took a fair few attempts to find the right question to help them identify their best hopes. A very negative pupil, very deficit thinking. Initially, we used role playing with dolls, but they got very emotionally involved, which highlighted their vulnerabilities. And they were even identified that they were beginning to stim, so they were getting really dysregulated by being involved in that. So it was cut short. We then tried drawing, but this was something that they hyper focused on because it's a favourable activity. But again, it was difficult for them to stay focused, and they started out drawing a lovely picture of their friend, which you can see kind of descends into chaos on the other side. So they're having a lovely time on the left hand side, and then all of a sudden they were attacking this other pupil and kicking them, and it all went a bit wrong. So again, we needed to move on to something else. So to support them, I created these formats to guide the practitioner and the pupil, because the practitioner herself was getting stuck as well during the supervision session, saying, there's such a negative pupil, everything descends into negativity or goes the wrong way. How do we kind of refocus this? So prior to completing these formats, they discussed and drew out lots and lots of different groups of friends. So they wanted to include themselves in different groups. Um, so they showed and drew out all the different groups of friends, so to see that they had options, to see that they had autonomy, that they had choices, because they were quite stuck in feeling left out. They talked through the format, and again, they went on to do some scaling. She chose to do the red, green, and yellow faces. And again, individuals with visuals were then made, which allowed her to complete this again individually, independently on her own. There was no support from the practitioner at this point in these final sessions of the scaling. They used all the visuals and just put them where they wanted them to be. So from these visuals that they put together, we then created this again, so to include myself in different groups. And this is then used to support them through their day-to-day and to be able to manage this. I met with this pupil's parents not long after the intervention, and they discussed what an impact this had had at home. So this pupil was then ended up being able to access going on residential in year 6, and to be able to access going on the celebrations around leaving school, which was really, really lovely to hear. And the final case study was at the specialist school. So this pupil had the highest level of learning disability and support need. They were year 6, but working at a year 1 level, and they experienced significant sensory difficulties and challenges. So I thought that this was going to be the most challenging, but in some ways they adapted the easiest, because visuals are part of their bread and butter, day-to-day practice, and it's embedded within the school's ethos and practice. So their goal was to be okay when Lucy isn't available. So Lucy being their class teacher. And we began by just using their daily timetable, which you can see on the left-hand side, and tried to talk through that with the visuals, but it quickly became obvious that there was too much information, too much overload. So we broke it down and we did each section, as you can see on the right-hand side. So they completed one of these for each session that they did throughout the day when their teacher wasn't available. We talked around how they'd managed before, when it had been okay, all of those questions to support and to facilitate it. So they again chose to do, sorry, the middle one's a bit blurry, the red, green, and yellow faces. And it was absolutely astounding, because in the last session, they did this completely independently. A pupil who I didn't think would be able to do it, given the cognitive ability of the pupil. And the language that came out and the understanding was just phenomenal. So the final document we then made, again, similar to the others, we put this together, and this was actually right next to them on by their desk. The following term, their teacher, so Lucy, was off for 2 weeks, and this document and the process that they've just been through actually supported that change, and they managed really, really well. And they've also just had a really, really successful transition into high school as well. So it was absolutely fascinating to see where the process that they'd been through. So one of the most powerful and impactful things to see in all of the cases, particularly during the scaling sessions, which they all did independently, was this realization that they had a choice. So if they felt red or at number 1, that didn't have to become their day, or in some instances their life, that they had a choice, that they had autonomy and a way out which they could lead on. And it felt like a really, and you can almost see it in the videos, like a real light bulb moment for them, on which that point alone really has made the research just so worthwhile, and just so impactful from what we've seen.